And you've just heard Caught the Sun by Adam Ross, taken from the new album Literal Zone. And I'm delighted to be joined by Adam now. Hello there.
Hello.
So Caught the Sun is sort of a title track in that it mentions the literal zone. Before we go on, can you explain the title of the album?
Yes. So it's a sort of scientific term that is used to describe where the sea meets the coast, or meets the land on the coast, I guess. It's that kind of zone between the beach and the deep water, I guess. And it was a term that I came across by chance, and as somebody that quite enjoys puns and a bit of wordplay, I thought there was something in that. And it was well suited to the album because most of the songs in there have some sort of link to the coast and my current location. I moved to the East Coast, and yeah, it inspired a lot of the songs that made an appearance on the album.
Yeah, there's a real strong sense of place throughout the album, I think. And that's interesting that now this is your second solo album, is that right?
Yes, yes.
And did you also make the first one before or after you'd moved?
Well, it's complicated.
Okay, fair enough.
I moved to the northeast of Scotland and ended up recording my first album up here. But then in 2021, I moved again within northeast and moved to the coast. I was living further inland to begin with.
Yeah.
Makes sense. The previous album was called Staring at Mountains.
That's what I was thinking. I kind of had the strong memory that there was a real sense of place in the last album as well. So, you know, that, and I wondered, is that part of the kind of pleasure of doing solo albums, is that you can theme them that's very personal rather than perhaps share these themes around?
I guess so. Yeah, like I didn't plan for it to have a kind of overarching theme. It wasn't devised as a concept album or anything like that, but it's more when you kind of sit back and put the songs in a list, you start to see trends. But it was kind of inevitable anyway. Like the songs go back to that time of like 2021 when the pandemic was still going on, and there wasn't actually that much else to do other than wander the beaches and cliff tops. So yeah.
There are worse places to be if you're being locked down, I guess.
Precisely.
Yeah. And Caught the Sun, as people will hear, it kind of shows your way with a lyric, as does Bramble, which we're going to play later on. I have to say, I do love the rhyme of Bankery and Tankery. That's a particular favourite of mine on the album. And it made me think, how do you construct your songs? How, do they develop?
It depends. There's different ways, but like that one, Brambles, it sort of felt almost like a companion piece to a song on the first album called Alice and Christine. Not thematically, but just in the way the lyrics are structured. It is lots of rhyming, like fairly dense patterns. And I remember hearing Neil Hannon from the Divine Comedy once talking about, I think it was that song of his called Norman and Norma.
Right, yes.
And saying that he just kind of, the first line occurred to him, and then the second line, and then you have to keep going to find out what's going to happen to these characters next. And I felt the same thing, particularly when they are character songs, which Christine is and Brambles is. There is that sense of you feel obliged to keep writing and find out how it's going to end. So I enjoy I don't write many songs like that, but I quite enjoy the kind of almost like creative writing aspect of that. Whereas other songs that are a bit more abstract or a bit more personal, sometimes they tumble out. Sometimes it's, I've got a constant array of little phone documents on my mobile with lines or lyrics or vague ideas, and sometimes it's just a jigsaw puzzle of putting them all together. Sometimes I'll be maybe 80% of the way through finishing a song, but I'm lacking something, and I can revert back to the phone list and see if there's anything that slots in. So yeah, you just do whatever it takes, really.
It's interesting you talk about the song having characters in it and almost storytelling about those characters, because a song that reminded me of when I first heard it was Ben Folds' Jack and Sarah. I think it's Ben Folds that does it. And it's exactly that kind of thing. You know, you're learning about these characters, and as their relationship develops or falls apart or all those things. And it's interesting to hear you say about the different ways you work, because lyrics are clearly very important to your music, and that there's nothing as clear as a structure every time. It's just how it occurs to you every time.
Pretty much, yeah.
And it's interesting that if you have a theme, it's kind of where the land meets the sea, because the album's produced by Andrew Vaslik. That's right, isn't it? And I know he's written about that space as well in the past. How was it working with Andrew, and how did it come about?
It was great. He was a gem to work with. I'd never met him before, but I had demos recorded of the album, and they were quite sort of piano led, which was new for me. Like, usually I write songs on guitar, but again, the fact I'd moved house, it gave me for the first time space to have a piano in the house. So I've been recording them, and that sort of lent itself to a particular sound that I was aiming for. It was a bit more of a kind of 1970s kind of sound. I guess sort of in my head, I was hoping for a sort of Carole King-esque, you know, like very dry drum kits and nice chunky bass lines and all that kind of stuff, and obviously the strings and brass as well. So I was listening to, I think it was Andrew's Fugitive Light album quite a lot at the time, and thought, okay, he would do a really good job of it, and thought I might as well get in touch. So I asked Jan Burnett from Spare Snare,
yeah,
with Andrew, and I know Jan a wee bit, so he put me in touch with Andrew. Sent him the tunes. He seemed interested. Went and met him in Arbroath. He was gigging with Roddy Woomble in Arbroath, so managed to get down and see them during their sound check and have a wee chat with Andrew. And yeah, sort of to my surprise, he agreed to be involved. But I was delighted because, you know, he's a busy guy. He's a very sort of in demand and respected musician. So it was a nice kind of boost for me personally, just to think, okay, well, if he's interested, then maybe I'm onto something that isn't terrible. So yeah, he came on board as producer and co-performer. So two of us played quite a lot of what's on the album, and then there's some other fantastic musicians involved as well. But yeah, Andrew, he kind of steered the ship. He's got a studio in Dundee, which was quite handy traveling distance for me, but also he was able to work independently. I was able to record stuff at home and send it over. And yeah, he's just very, very kind of patient, and he's got good ideas. He knows when to veto my naff ideas without making a big deal of it. And yeah, he brought a huge amount of kind of creativity and perspectives to it that I wouldn't have had myself.
And you mentioned other musicians who are on it, and there are some fine musicians playing. Who are they? Who else is involved?
Yeah, so Gillian Fleetwood sings backing vocals throughout the album. She's a brilliant musician, pianist, harp player as well. She's played in state broadcasters and with Martin John Henry. She's got her new solo album out this year as well. But I've always been a big fan of her voice, mostly from gigging with the state broadcasters. So I thought she would be a great shout to sing on the album, and I think our voices work quite well together, and she's good fun as well and quite intuitive about how she approaches recording sessions. So that was great. Rachel Simpson plays brass. She performs on a lot of Andrew's records and had that kind of pre-existing relationship. Pete Harvey wrote the string arrangements and then organised string sessions with 4 different string players. I think that's everyone. Yeah, everything else was.
Often when I ask that question of people, they start to look worried. They go, "Who have I forgotten? Have I forgotten anyone?"
Yeah.
What's it like working on a solo material rather than as part of a band, rather than as part of Randolph Sleep? Is it hugely different, or yeah, what's the difference to you?
It's pretty different. I mean, I'm not the best person to ask about that, because even with Randolph Sleep, I end up sort of doing little bits and bobs myself. There's always been a sort of slightly blurry line between whether Randolph Sleep is a band or a solo thing. Yeah. Although I feel like in recent times, I've been making a sort of clearer distinction between those two things. And now that I do have material out under my own name, I think that's the way it's going to go. That stuff with the band is things that I devise as band songs. And that's been really good fun, actually, because I've started recording demos for what I hope will be the next Randolph Sleep album. And I'm not worrying too much about whether those songs can be performed in a solo guise with an acoustic guitar, which is something I'm always more conscious of. Like with the first few Randolph Sleep albums, I wanted the songs to be able to function in a more stripped back setting, but I'm less bothered about that now because I've got another outlet for that kind of music. So some of the new Randolph Sleep tunes are more reliant on like bass lines, for instance. So yeah, I'm writing in different ways now. But yeah, in terms of the recording process, it is quite different. You have obviously fewer opinions to learn from or have to listen to. Like there's more control in having a setup, but arguably you lose that kind of melting pot effect of having lots of different people in there. But Andrew was great in that perspective. He's quite experienced in terms of the different groups he's played in. The Hazy Jones were sort of a indie folk band. He plays bass in Idlewild, who are a rock band, I guess. His own stuff is quite jazzy, so he's able to bring different flavors to things himself. And to be honest, I was quite happy with this record to relinquish a lot of the control and let someone else really produce it, because the term producer gets used a lot, but in the past we've had people who are credited as producers, but it's been a kind of co-production where like Randolph Sleep ourselves have kind of produced the album in terms of creative decisions, and then you've got somebody acting as more of a kind of sound engineer making all those changes happen. And it's usually quite flexible. You usually end up in a relationship where the sound engineer can also make creative suggestions. But I feel like with this album with Andrew, it was a more kind of true producer position that he took on.
Actually, just as you're mentioning that, even within his own solo work, it can be very different. I've seen him live in different guises, just him within a part of a 3-piece, him with full band. It changes nearly kind of every time. And what about Randolph Sleep? Is there any news with them? You mentioned demos. Is there kind of plans afoot?
Yeah, we've got gigs this year. We're playing in Glasgow and Newport on Tay, and we're going to Norway as well for the Indie Fjord Festival. So yeah, we've not been up to much since Christmas. I think that was our last gig. Obviously I've carved out a bit of space just to let this solo album breathe. But no, we'll need to get together pretty soon actually to start rehearsing for these gigs. And like I say, there's demos, I think just about enough songs for a new album that have been demoed. So the next stage is to start working on them as a band and hopefully make a start on recording them as well. So being realistic, it'll be a little while before anything's ready for release, but we're hoping to drop some new songs into the live set relatively soon. It's just a case of getting everyone together. We are more spread out geographically than we used to be. You know, there's members of the band that are even further north than I am. So
yeah, imagine.
Yeah.
Talking of gigs, are you touring the solo album? Is there plans to do that? Are there plans?
Yeah, so I'm launching it on Thursday this week, although by the time this goes out, that will probably be in the past.
It will be, yes, but I'm hoping it's been a fantastic success for you.
An unbelievable success. What a night. So then I'm kind of back into solo acoustic mode. So the launch is with a band. Then yeah, the summer is more kind of stripped back stuff. I'm playing all over Scotland, so got shows lined up in Caerlough and Skye and Argyll and Bute, a few other places. And then October is the plan to take the band out on tour. So the dates being pulled together currently for that, which will be announced in due course.
Well, when they are, I will definitely let people know about it. I'm just thinking, did writing it mainly on the piano change the songs themselves? And that sounds daft now that I've said it out loud. But, you know, did you noticeably think these sound different from other solo, from the previous album?
Yeah. They came out more melancholic. I don't know why. It's probably linked to my skills as a pianist, which are very, very minimal. So they tended to be quite simple and slow. You know, I can't play the piano quickly. So yeah, it probably led to a kind of slower tempo of song. Yeah, I don't know. Like I've since obviously learned to play the songs on guitar and in the live band for most of my gigs. I'm now performing them on guitar, but the actual writing happened on piano, and it was a novelty as well. So I was, you know, trying new things, and you know, if you're constantly writing songs on the guitar, you end up inevitably falling into the same chord patterns and playing styles. So it's really useful sometimes to try and write songs on a different instrument, because your hands do different things, which then leads your voice to do different things, and you do different things. So yeah, it definitely changed the vibe.
And you mentioned Carole King earlier. Are there other singer-songwriters whose main instrument is the piano that kind of influence you or have influenced the album?
There are quite a few artists and groups that Andrew and I talked about as production references. I guess there were a few kind of more kind of throwback things like that, but some kind of modern acts as well, like Wise Blood was one, Father John Misty, like that kind of sound that does sort of hark back to the late 60s, early 70s kind of, you know, peak age of the confessional singer-songwriter, you know, kind of Joni Mitchell, John Lennon.
Yeah.
But there are people doing interesting things with that sound nowadays as well. So yeah, I would say those were influences.
Yeah, so it's an East Coast album because that's where you are, but it's kind of East Coast of America vibes to it too, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Well, Adam, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. It's always a pleasure, and the very best of luck with the album.
Thank you very much. Thanks for chatting.
And this is Adam Ross and Brambles.